pay up front," the lady said, as the man in front of her started ambling in her direction. $50. The man reached into his pocket, but his hand came out empty. The lady shook her head and said, "You know the rules, Joe. Money first, then business." "You know I'm good for the money, Diamond," Joe said. "Just this once, can you cut me a break? I'll pay double tomorrow." "No can do," Diamond replied. "No special favors. That's just the way the business works. Come back when you have money." Joe had other plans. He pulled a knife from his pocket and cut one of the spaghetti straps on Diamond's blouse before she realized what was happening. In a voice more stern than she had used before, Diamond said, "Get out of here, now!" Joe didn't speak, but held the knife up to Diamond's throat. She started to scream, but he didn't back down. "You don't say no to me, you filthy bitch," Joe finally said, and moved the knife down to stab Diamond in the gut. She let out a yell, but continued to try to push Joe away. He continued stabbing anywhere on her he could reach. He didn't stop until she lay limp in his arms. He then turned over her corpse and had his way with it. If he had left as soon as she was dead, he might have survived. Before he was finished with the corpse, Joe started to smell smoke. He ignored it because he was distracted. It didn't matter anyway. There was too many places it could have been coming from in this disgusting theme park, and none of them were danger signs. When he was finished, he zipped up his pants and walked toward the door. The temperature in the building seemed to have risen quite a bit just in the few minutes he had been with Diamond. He wasn't very far into the hall when all of the lights shut out. "Shit!" he cursed as he searched blindly in his pocket for matches. The smell reaching his nose ceased to be merely smoke and became recognizable as burning flesh. He ran in the opposite direction from the flickering light he saw coming around a corner, but there was nowhere to go. The doors were all locked. The flames quickly followed the light around the corner. Joe backed into a corner at the other end of the hallway, but there was nothing else he could do. He called out for someone, anyone, to help him, but no one was there to hear him. They had already burned. The flames approached slowly, teasing him like a cat might do to a mouse before killing it. In the end, all Joe could do was stand there, watching the flames coming closer and swallowing him. The same scene played out all the way across the park. The dance hall burned to the ground, with dancers still in it. A train topped with flames sped down the track of the roller coaster. A small house just inside the park fell to the ground in a ball of flames, with Marlon Grant's family still inside. It was the busiest night the park had ever seen, and no one survived. Every soul in attendance was consumed by uncontrollable flames. Police investigation determined that the fire was started by an electrical short in the lighting system in the dance hall. From there, the flames had spread and taken down the whole park before firefighters could get to the scene. The whole thing, they determined, had been a tragic accident. No charges were pressed against the now disfigured Marlon Grant, the only known survivor of the Crystal City fire. "Where are you taking me?" I demanded, as a band of cannibals who had just recently tried to kill me wheeled me in a hospital bed from an abandoned hospital room where I had almost died. Vince Pretius, a tall, thin man with big eyes, walked behind as Big Baby and a short man dressed like a chef pushed my bed. Big Baby was over 5 feet tall, but appeared in every other way to be nothing more than an infant. I had never properly met the chef, only seen him briefly right before I escaped the cannibal house. "Sit still, Mr. O'Lantern," Pretius told me. "You will reach your destination soon enough." Turning to the short man in the chef's hat, he said, "You can go ahead and tranquilize him." I didn't like the sound of that at all. I tried to fight, but I knew it was no good. Before Pretius and his housemates had showed up, I had been restrained to the bed by a couple of goons who had beat me almost to death. My limbs were still tied to the bed. I shook as violently as I could, but it was useless. Big Baby held down my arm while the chef plunged a syringe into it. Everything instantly went hazy. As we made it out the front door of the hospital to a parking lot riddled with cracks and potholes, I saw what appeared to be a roller coaster car sitting in the parking lot. I was really confused when I realized that's where they were taking me. The roller coaster car looked shiny and brand new, and the front of it declared it Crystal City's Tumbler. Whatever they had injected into me must have been some kind of hallucinogen. They unloaded me from the bed into the tumbler car, which then took off into the air, free from tracks. I faintly remember a vague panic about whether or not the restraints on the roller coaster car were properly fastened. In my current state, that was the most important thing, and then I blacked out before the car reached its destination. "Hey, buddy," a grumpy voice woke me from a deep sleep. "What are you doing, pal? You know trespassing is illegal, right?" I looked blearily up from where I had been sleeping to see that I appeared to be in some kind of theme park. I was sleeping in a roller coaster train that currently sat in the loading bay of a roller coaster called the Tumbler. The man in front of me appeared to be in his 50s, had a graying beard, and wore a polo shirt with an emblem on it that said Crystal City Theme Park. "Where am I?" I questioned. "No telling what you're on," the man grumbled, trying to push me out of the car. He then said directly to me, "Trespassing is a crime, son, and I will call the police if you don't get on out of here." I started to get up from the train car and looked around. There was, in fact, a whole amusement park around me, and one I had never seen before. Crystal City rang no bells for me, and yet here I was. I stumbled my way out of the loading platform on the roller coaster and looked around at the rest of the theme park. I made my way toward the exit, still trying to figure out how I got there in the first place. On the way toward the front of the park, I noticed a mirror outside an attraction called the Fun House. What I saw in the mirror surely can't have been me. Deep down, though, I knew it was. A blurry memory of leaving an abandoned hospital in a roller coaster car came to me. I realized I was still dressed as Mr. O'Lantern. My pumpkin suit was very torn up, but I was no longer bruised and bloody. I also realized with a jolt of surprise that my foot was not broken. I was walking. How long had I been unconscious? I continued making my way toward the front gate, seeing all kinds of oddities along the way. I couldn't figure out how I had gotten so far from home, but it was no surprise that I was attracting stares from all the vendors in my weird outfit. I didn't suppose people outside my local area knew about Mr. O'Lantern, so they thought I was just some weirdo who didn't know how to dress. In a way, I supposed, I was. "Trespassing," the man at the roller coaster had said. That was odd, since this seemed to be a public theme park. Of course, since I didn't know how I'd got here, I assumed my admission probably had not been paid. Then something else struck me. With the exception of the employees, I seemed to be the only person in the park. In my current disorientation, it took me longer than it should have to figure that out. It finally came to me. The man at the roller coaster had accused me of trespassing because the park wasn't open yet. As if on cue, when I thought of this, people came rushing in from the direction I was headed. I was pushed with the crowd back through the park and found myself back in front of the fun house. "Hey, freak, get some normal clothes," I heard one of them yell from the crowd. Another call of "Where'd you get your outfit, faggot?" came from somewhere nearby. Cigarettes dangled from the lip of everyone who was old enough to legally smoke them, and I suspect some that weren't. With the motion of the crowd, I ended up at the entrance to the funhouse. 20 cents, the bald man in front of the attraction told me as I approached the door. I already felt self-conscious because of my pumpkin clothes in a place that obviously was far from home, so I decided to just pay it so I didn't draw more attention to myself. 20 cents didn't really amount to anything anyway. I pulled a $10 bill from my wallet and handed it to the man. "Is this some kind of joke, asshole?" the man asked me as he examined the bill. He handed it back to me and said, "Where do you get off handing me a counterfeit bill?" "It's not counterfeit," I told him, not taking the bill. He pulled the cigarette from his mouth with his free hand while he dropped the money from the other. "Money is green," he told me, "not brown. Why don't you go home and try again?" "I'll cover the pumpkin, man," came a voice from about 10 yards back. I froze as I heard that voice, because I instantly recognized it, and it did not belong to someone I wanted to see. I turned around to see Vince Pretius walking through the line toward me. He handed the bald man $1 and said, "The rest is for you." We both walked into the funhouse. "You're in danger here," Vince told me as we started through the mirror maze. "You're a cannibal," I said, as if that were a normal response. "Things are not always what they seem," he said. "Do not judge by what you feel, Mr. O'Lantern. Use your intuition. Why do you think the man out front thought your money was counterfeit?" "We have nothing to talk about," I told him firmly, and continued through the mirror maze. I'm not sure how he managed it. Maybe he had been here before and knew the maze, but he ended up in front of me. I fought back an urge to strangle him right then and there, but I believed he had, for some reason, just saved my life. "We have lots to talk about," he said, holding out a hand to stop me. "We are searching for the same thing. Please take a moment to listen to me." "You don't know what I'm searching for," I told him, pushing him aside. "You know nothing about me." I pushed him out of the way and continued through the maze, finding its end not far after. A fortune-teller in a gaudy costume stood in the room after the mirror maze with a crystal ball on her table. "Come over here," she said in an accent that needed work. "Let Madame Ray tell you your future. Nothing is hidden from the inner eye. With your palm and my crystal ball, I can tell you what is in store for you." The room was conveniently set up so that her table was impossible to avoid. As I tried to walk by, she grabbed my arm and said, "You must want to know your future. Am I wrong?" She touched the crystal ball, and it lit up. With one of my gloved hands in both of hers, she began to peel back the black glove. A shock ran through me when her skin first made contact with my bare hand, and she said, "I see that you're not from around here. You have been through much hardship and are unsure what conclusions to draw about how things will turn out. Many difficult decisions lie in front of you." "That's the most generic crap I've ever heard," I told the lady in a bored voice, doing a bad imitation of her bad accent. "I sense that you're a fraud." Her body suddenly went rigid, and her voice changed. It was deeper, seeming to come from somewhere other than her mouth, and her lips moved with every word. "Fire," she said in a deep voice. "The flames are unstoppable, and the everything will burn. Nothing you see is to be trusted. What happens next is either the beginning or the end. What you seek is before you, but be careful what you search for. Some questions are best left unanswered. The future is behind you, and the past is in front of you. You are in danger. You will burn. As she finished this speech, the light came back into her eyes. I'd be lying if I said this bit hadn't made me a little bit uncomfortable. What can I say? Her voice was now her own again, and the bad accent was gone. I'm working for $1.50 an hour. This is not a Broadway show. Right, I said slowly, taking my hand back and moving on. I walked into the next room and saw a giant cauldron in the middle of the room. 2 middle-aged women in cheap witch costumes were walking around a giant cauldron. One of them was holding a giant wooden spoon. "Look, my dear," the spoon witch said to the other one. "Dinner has arrived." She then turned to me and said, "Can I help you into the cauldron dinner?" As she touched my arm, I was no longer in a cheap amusement park attraction. I was in a house I'd never seen before, looking at a middle-aged woman I didn't recognize. "What is going on with you?" the woman asked. "You've never been like this before. Why all of a sudden do you need to close the park?" "The demons are in the park," I told her solemnly. "They'll control us all if it's not handled now." "Marlon, I don't know what you're talking about. You're worrying me." Her face twisted into a look of horror and wonder. I continued to pace around the kitchen, trying to make sure nothing was about to take over my body. "Why don't you have a seat and relax? You've had too much stress on you lately running this park." "No time to rest," I told her. "It's too late to purge the park of dark forces. The park needs to be closed." Suddenly, without warning, I was back in the funhouse. The 2 witches that had been walking around the cauldron were now holding on to me, both wearing worried expressions on their made-up faces. "Do you need to sit down?" one of the witches asked. It briefly resonated in my mind that she had just offered to help me into the cauldron that sat in the middle of the room. "You look like you're going to faint." "I'm okay," I assured them. "I just need some water." The other witch left the room and came back several minutes later with a paper cup filled with warm water. I gulped it down in 2 swallows and thanked her. Despite my insistence that I didn't need to rest, they both then helped me into a small air-conditioned room where sat a table and several chairs. Nobody was in the room except me and the 2 witches, who assured me as they left that they would be back to check on me after a few moments. After what felt like some time, I heard a low voice whispering to me. It said, "What has happened cannot be changed. You can try to play the hero, but you will fail. In order to reach your objective, you must see these events unfold." I looked around but saw no one there. The voice continued, "Although before your birth, this is where your story begins." Then, as though by an act of magic, the man I had been shown in my life film at Mortem House had appeared in front of me. He still wore the same black robe and black mask. "What does this have to do with finding out what happened to my wife?" I asked him, anger rising in me again, as it had done on the night he had given me my powers. "The story of the future always begins in the past," he said vaguely. When I didn't answer, he said, "In order to find out where she was headed, you must know things you never knew. You must know the events that led to her search and continue to understand what she was looking for." Only that path will lead you to where she was headed. She was having an affair, I screamed angrily. I already know that. She was having an affair with that son of a bitch Vince Pretius. You must not jump to conclusions, Jack Geist. Learn all the facts and use them wisely. As he said this, he disappeared. I was no longer sitting down, but remained in the room I had been brought to relax. Are you feeling any better, sir? A man's voice boomed into the room, but one I didn't recognize. I looked up into a face that felt familiar, although I had never seen it before. I am, I lied. Thank you for checking on me. I'm ready to head back out if you'll show me the way. Not quite, he said. There's something I need to talk to you about. My name is Marlon Grant, by the way. I was wondering what the reason is for your ridiculous clothing choices. I've never seen anyone wearing an outfit like that, not even the children, and I always try to avoid any kind of disturbances at my park. I'm sure you understand. It's a long story, I started. His expression didn't change, and I knew he was waiting to hear it, so I continued. Where I'm from, I'm well known, and this is how people expect me to dress. I got here by mistake, and as soon as I figure out where I am, I'll be headed back home. Where are you from? He asked me. I told him the city, and he frowned. Mister, is this your idea of a joke? You know as well as I do that you're in the city you're telling me about. What exactly is the meaning of this? I looked at him confused, but he really seemed to think I was putting him on. I stayed silent, and he finally said, I opened this park in 1922. And in over 30 years of operation, I have never seen anything like this happen. I'm not going to have one freak belittle my park's reputation in one day. I have abilities, I told him. I can show you. Let's go outside. He led me outside, but I could tell it was only because he thought I would make a fool of myself. I didn't care what he thought, because my plan was to simply fly away from the park once we were outdoors. Call the hospital, I heard Marlon Grant tell a lady in an office that we passed by in the back of the building. We were further away from the part of the building the public saw, even than the break room I had been led to originally. We walked out the back. Okay, show me what you got, he muttered with no real interest or belief. I was about to take off flying when I started really thinking about something he had said. 1922. 30 years. The out-of-place feeling I had had since I found myself in this place. I tried to leap from the ground, but found myself face first in the pavement instead of shooting into the air. Before I could get up, he took my arms and held them behind me. I tried to escape, but he was unbelievably strong. He started walking me toward another part of the park, and with his strength I was unable to resist. I couldn't understand why I hadn't been able to fly. Between anger and frustration, my skin should have been glowing, but it wasn't. While I was in his grasp, my mind flashed to somewhere else. I watched the same middle-aged woman I had seen before talking on the phone. When she hung up, she looked over at me and said, There's a disturbance in the fun house. They want you to go check it out. I told you demons were in the park, I told her in the same calm voice I had used during the last one of these flashes. I'll take care of the fun house, and we will purge the park of demons tonight. Crystal City has met its end. I was then back in the park, being restrained by Marlon Grant. We approached a building, and he walked me into it. As we got into the building, I heard him tell a woman behind a desk, This one needs to be committed. Make the call, please. I leaned over at the woman, who had beautiful red hair. He continued pushing me toward a room a little way beyond the desk, shoved me into it, and locked the door from the outside. There was a window in the room, but examination of it showed the glass to be at least 6 inches thick. It would be implausible to try to break it. Outside, I could see park guests going on their favorite rides, buying food, or just excitedly walking through the park. I couldn't stop thinking about what Marlon Grant had said about his park, that it had been successful for 30 years since 1922. Was he under the mistaken impression that this was the 1950s? Even more odd, was this the 1950s? Within the confines of my new prison cell, I tried to fly again. I still couldn't do it. I just fell straight to the ground yet again. I tried to project myself into the Mortem House, but I couldn't do that either. Had I for some reason lost all of my abilities? Anger flooded me, but my skin wasn't glowing. The masked man in the woods that night had told me he would give me the tools to find Becky. Was I to lose those tools once I found her? I had discovered after I met Vince Pretius that Becky had been eaten by cannibals after having an affair with one. Did that mean the Pumpkin Man was done and was no longer necessary? I tried to think of a way out of this room, but nothing came to me. I had no doubt that I would die here if I couldn't escape, as I would be killed either by violent means or by starvation. Death would not be such a bad thing any more, though. Becky was dead, and I had no reason to go on without her. However, death by starvation would be long and torturous. Perhaps I could speed up the process. I began to look around the room to see if there was something in it to kill myself with. There was a drain in the middle of the room, which I found deeply disturbing on its own. There were handcuffs on the wall, and a hose coming out of the other one. I deduced that this room was mostly used as a torture chamber. I noticed that most of the torture devices were not stored in the room. It became clear that Marlon Grant was a sick man, and he didn't want anyone dying quickly once he decided to torture them. I needed to die quickly, though. I wasn't sure how to go about doing that, but I was desperate to avoid being tortured before I died. I wondered if I might be able to use the handcuffs to cut into my wrists. I couldn't think of any other options in here. I didn't have time to try it out, though, because before I got to that wall, it was gone. An explosion rocked the park, and didn't seem to be very far outside the room I was currently in. I started hearing people screaming, and I could see them running around frantically. I was knocked on my back and was unable to get up. Pain shot through my leg, and I looked down to see it was covered in blood. From somewhere beyond the locked door, I heard Marlon yell, "It's happening tonight. It's time." I could only assume that meant he was coming for me. I assumed it would be quickly, too, because I assumed he knew the wall had been blown out, but not that I couldn't move. I saw somebody fast approaching, but the frame was far too slim to be Grant. In fact, this appeared to be a woman. "Mr. O'Lantern," she called as she got close. "Is that you?" She ran toward me and knelt down beside me. "I didn't think I was ever going to see you again, but we have to stop meeting when you're injured." "You are a nurse, though," I pointed out. I looked up at Naomi and thought about when I first met her. It had only been a few weeks, but it felt like years after everything that had happened since then. We had first met in the cage at the house where Vince Pretius and his fellow cannibals had tried to kill us. "Very true," she said, and she laughed just a little despite the horrors around us. "Something isn't right about this place," I told her. "There's something off. The man that runs the theme park seems to think this is the 50s. As she knelt over my injured body, this felt familiar. Her red hair hung over me and drew my attention. It was beautiful hair. "This is the 50s, she told me. "I don't know how you got here, but we are in great danger. You have to go back to when you came from." "I don't know how I got here either," I informed her. "I ran into Vince Pretius again, and he drugged me. I thought he was going to kill me, and I'm not sure why he didn't. He acted like he was trying to save me, and then he... Wait." I stopped for a second while my mind centered on something else. "How did you get here?" "I'm not any more sure about that than you are," she said, turning her head away from me. I felt like she was hiding something, but I didn't press it. We could discuss that later. "The fact is that something terrible is about to happen here. You must not be here when it does. The fact that you are here puts the whole world in danger." "How can my presence put the world in danger?" I asked. "How is that even possible? I'm just one person." Pretending not to have heard me, she said, "We need to get you out of here before too much time passes. The night's events have already been set in motion. It is imperative that you don't get stuck here. Can you move?" I tried to push myself up, and managed to a little, but not completely. She took my hand, and a chill ran through my body. Even with her help, I was unable to get up, and I just collapsed back down. She thought for a minute, and finally said, "Can you fly?" "My powers are gone," I told her. "I tried to fly earlier when Marlin locked me up." "What is this, anyway?" I motioned toward the room in general. "It's a torture chamber," she said, confirming what I had already known. "We suspected it was here, but we didn't know for sure. Marlin has been nuts for years, obsessed with catching demons. He thinks they're in the park now, and he'll stop at nothing to destroy them." I tried to wrap my head around all of this. The man in the dark mask had told me that this was where my story started. How could any of this possibly have anything to do with me? I had figured out I was being shown a glimpse of the past, and this had happened more than 30 years before I was born. None of it made any sense. All these things meshed together, and totally unrelated words poured from my mouth. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. As expected, Naomi looked taken aback. "It's not that I don't appreciate it, because I do, but you're putting yourself in unnecessary danger, and I can't imagine what you have to gain from it." "I personally am not in danger, Jack," she said. "I'm completely safe." She reached down and touched my face. "You are the one who is in danger." "I can't stop," I told her. "I have to know what happened to my wife." Another thought struck me as I was talking. "How do you know my real name?" "I'm a friend," she said vaguely. "You have to know that." "I'm trying to help you." Then, without warning, she leaned down and pressed her lips to mine. Her mouth was dry, but the kiss was not unpleasant. A warmth shot through my body as her kiss lingered. I felt my pain drifting away. After a few moments, she sat back up. "I'm probably going to get in trouble for that," Naomi said in a confident tone. "But I'd do it again." As she spoke, I realized that I was now able to move the parts of my body that I couldn't before. I gave her a confused look, and she shrugged it off. She said, "No time to explain right now. We've got to get out of here. Or at least you do." "What about you?" I asked. "You're not planning to sacrifice yourself, are you?" "I have to stay here," she told me firmly. "One day you'll understand why." She helped pull me to my feet, and we walked through the shattered wall back into the park. She told me, "You're probably expecting Marlin to come back for you after the explosion went off. He's aware that you'll likely escape after the explosion, but he's willing to take that risk because he doesn't think you're a demon. He thinks you're just a symptom of them." At my puzzled stare, she added, "Totally nuts, remember?" We walked back toward the roller coaster, passing the funhouse and all of the other things I had already seen. With everything going on, it took me longer than it should have to realize that the sky was going dark. I questioned Naomi about this, and again she gave me a vague answer. "Time is passing." "What is going on here?" I asked her straight out, knowing that she knew more than she was telling. "Why is it that after you kissed me I could walk again? Why is it getting dark so early? And why is a theme park, 60 years destroyed, important to figuring out what happened to my wife?" Naomi put a hand on my shoulder, but I brushed it off. She looked deeply hurt, but I needed answers. Even if I was being shown something important, why had she also ended up here if this was 60 years in the past? She was a part of this somehow, and I was starting to suspect that she was working for Vince Pretius. "All of these questions will be answered," she assured me, "but I cannot give you that information now. If I do, it would not be useful to you in unraveling the mystery of Becky Geist. There is more to this story than you know, Mr. O'Lantern. It will become clear in time, I promise." Across the park, smoke rose from the dance hall. The look on Naomi's face went from hurt to panic. She grabbed my arm and started pulling me toward the front gate, insisting that I must leave the park immediately. Instead, I shook her off and started running toward the dance hall. I was determined to figure out what was going on. She ran after me, but I lost her after just a few minutes. Flames were now visible on the roof of the dance hall, and people across the park had stopped to stare. The flames grew faster than what seemed normal, and were soon draped down the walls. I continued to run through the masses of people that seemed glued in place, trying to figure out why I had been brought here. I had no idea how much time had actually passed, or if Vince Pretius was still in the park. All I knew was that I needed to find out. As I got closer to the dance hall, I could hear screams coming out of it. The doors appeared to be bolted shut, and people pounded at them in an attempt to escape. More people stood staring as I got closer to the dance hall, and I had to push my way through the crowds. I was within 50 feet of the dance hall when the front doors burst open. People came pouring out, some of them already badly burned. Some people cheered as they realized that almost everyone would escape the fiery death trap. They thought so, at least. 10 seconds after people began pouring from the dance hall, the first ball of flame flew from the roof of the building and shot most of the way across the park. It landed on the roller coaster train halfway up the chain lift. No one that was on that ride would make it back to the station alive. It took about another 15 seconds for everyone to realize what they had just witnessed. When they did, the chaos began. People began pushing and shoving and knocking each other over in an attempt to get out of the park. Another ball of flames flew from the dance hall and burst through a window in a house just inside the park gate. I looked around, and Naomi was by my side again. As she screamed at me yet again that I had to get out of the park, I heard a woman calling for her daughter, "Lucy!" I scrambled around wanting to help, but unable to figure out how. Nobody seemed to be completely aware of their surroundings, as they wanted nothing except to be away from where they were. Many people were trampled and died before they were ever burned. "You can't stop it," Naomi told me. "You don't even have your powers here. All of this has already happened. You just have to keep yourself safe." "How can this have already happened?" I asked her, knowing that once again I would get no answer. "You just have to trust me, Jack," she replied. "You did before, in the cage. You trusted me, and that turned out all right. We escaped. We were alive. Please go now." The next ball of flames had flown from the dance hall and landed right next to the fun house. I watched as flames drifted over it and licked the side of the building. In the other direction, I saw Ari. Panic was in her eyes as a flame flew toward her and consumed her before she could do anything about it. This was the night Ari died, 60 years before she filled out admission paperwork for me to get into Mortem House. I looked back around, but Naomi had disappeared. A little girl was about 10 yards away from me wearing a purple coat and a blue hat. She was yelling as loud as she could, "Hank! Mommy's trying to find you, Hank! Where are you?" I ran to the girl and said, "Who's Hank, sweetie? I'll help you find him." "He's my brother," she told me. "He went missing when the fire started." "I'm going to help you find him," I told her. "Right now, I need you to make your way toward the front gate." "Why are you dressed so weird?" she asked, diverting attention from the crisis at hand in a way that only small children can. "It's a Halloween costume," I told her. "Please walk toward the front gate and be careful. Don't walk through groups of people." "It looks silly," she told me before she started walking. Only children are really that truly honest. "Please find my brother." Another ball of flames shot from the roof of the dance hall, and this one landed outside the perimeter of the park and spread to create a border around the fence. It created a barrier that looked like it was designed to keep everyone in the park as it closed in on everyone, consuming them along the way. The masses of people that had been pushing and shoving to make their way toward the exit were now pushing the opposite direction, trying to make their way toward the center of the park and out of the fire as long as possible. We were all trapped inside the flames now. The ride started falling one by one and smashing people the fire hadn't got to yet. The sounds of terrified screams joined the crackling of the fire to create what seemed like a scene right out of a horror movie. It hit me in that moment that I was never going to find Becky. If she was dead, I was ready to die, but I didn't want to go out like this. I would never get revenge on Vince Pretius, and I would never find out why she had gone to his house. The fire was rapidly closing in, and there was no way to escape it. I realized these were the final moments of my life. Naomi once again stood beside me, but she no longer looked angry. She just looked scared. She was pushed over by two parents running to join their kids. I took her hand and pulled her back up. She gave me a confused look, and I said, "I'm sorry, Naomi. I should have listened to you. I need to know what happened when you kissed me, though." "Who are you?" she asked. "I've never seen you before." "What are you talking about, Naomi?" I asked her, now confused. "How do you know my name?" she questioned. She paused for just a second, and then said, "It doesn't matter anymore, I guess. We're all about to die, so there won't be any more chances to do this. You're here, and I'm here. Might as well." Before I realized what she was talking about, she grabbed me around the waist and pulled me close to her, laying a long and passionate kiss on my lips. I was so surprised I didn't try to fight it. She was right. We were about to die. When she pulled away, her hair was on fire. The flames were way too close now. The only thing I could think to say was, "I'm Jack Geist." "Goodbye, Jack Geist," she said before she fell to the ground. I was amazed at how calm she was. She should have been yelling and screaming, but she didn't. She just laid down and died. It looked far more peaceful than it should have. Tears built up in my eyes, but I fought to not let them out. This woman had saved my life more than once, and I was now looking at her dead body in front of me. Reality seemed to fade into something hazy, something I couldn't quite make out. I saw something amazing happen in those last few minutes. People were no longer pushing and shoving. They were no longer running, and they were no longer fighting. Everyone that was left stood in a close group in the center of what was as yet flame-free. They all took hands. Everyone was holding hands with family, friends, or even strangers. It didn't matter. In those final moments, we were all together. In those final moments, we chose love over anger or hate. I took the hand of a tall man in a suit on my left, and a balding man in jeans and a t-shirt on my right. We were about to die, but we were together, and we would die as family. The flames grew closer and closer, seeming to slow down as they were right upon us. These last moments would be long and excruciating. The flames found the people at the outside of the group, and they stood there with more bravery than I felt. There were screams, but they stood up as long as they were physically able to do so. The flames closed in further and further, and everyone in the group died with dignity. I hadn't even realized until that moment that I was right in the center of the group. I closed my eyes and waited for the flames to find me. I never felt the heat. I never felt the pain. I just stood there with my eyes closed, knowing that the flames must be right upon me now. I stood holding hands with two complete strangers and waiting to die. I had reached the end of my life, and I realized I wasn't even upset about that. It was time to die. I felt my consciousness slowly fading. The pain never came, but I was definitely dying. Reality faded from my mind, and each thought became smaller and smaller. My name was Jack Geist. I had become the Pumpkin Man and been named Mr. O'Lantern. I was in an amusement park. Time. Fire. Becky. Death. I woke up in a place that was unfamiliar. There were bright lights, pastel colors, and I was wearing a large helmet of some kind. I tried to pull the helmet from my head, but it seemed to be wired into my neck. My hand was swatted away from the helmet, but my vision was completely blocked. I couldn't see who had done it. "You need to relax," a deep voice said. "The helmet can cause permanent damage if it's not removed the correct way. You're probably scared right now, but it's important that you relax." "Aren't I dead?" I asked. "You won't be able to communicate with me until the helmet is removed," he explained. "Just wait, and everything will make sense in time." I was tired of being told that everything would eventually make sense. "You're going to feel some sharp pains in your neck, but they are completely harmless." As promised, I started feeling sharp pains in the back of my neck. Each one was like a hot needle being pressed into my skin. As it happened, I felt my skin getting hot. I wondered briefly if I had regained my powers, but it seemed weird that that should happen in death. After 6 of those sharp pains in my neck, I felt the helmet being lifted from my head. I was shocked by the man who had removed it. Standing in front of me was another one of my cellmates from the Pretius House. Dave, the insurance agent, placed the helmet on a shelf on the other side of the room. This seemed to be some kind of medical examination room, but I couldn't figure out why Dave would be the one in charge. I looked around, trying to figure out more about my surroundings. "Are you dead too?" I asked him. He just smiled, and I continued. "I saw the fire. I was in the fire. I watched Naomi die, and there was no way to escape the fire. Are we in Mortem House?" I suddenly realized that this didn't look anything like what had greeted me at Mortem House when I had come so close to death before. "This is not Mortem House," Dave told me. "I can't explain any further right now. I wish I could. I'm sorry." I had no explanation for anything that had happened to me since I left Mortem House the last time. My head was spinning, my mind in overload. There had to be a way to figure out what was happening to me, but I didn't have a clue what it was. "I am dead, though, right?" I asked. He didn't even acknowledge that he heard me, simply walked from the room. I waited several seconds in confusion, then tried to follow him. The door was locked, so I started pounding it with my fists. "Let me out of here," I screamed through the door, sure that it was probably also soundproof. No one would be able to hear me, and I was wasting my breath. I kept yelling and hitting the door anyway. I must have done this for half an hour, or at least that's about how long it felt before I no longer had the strength to continue. I didn't even try to get back to the bed I had been in. Instead, I simply let myself collapse onto the floor. I didn't know how long I had been down there. It felt both like a really long time and no time at all. I saw feet walking back into the room, but I didn't even bother looking up to see who they belonged to. I recognized Dave's deep voice when he started talking. "You should have stayed in bed, Mr. O'Lantern," he told me. "It's not good to be exerting so much energy in your condition." He took my hands and pulled me to my feet. He must have had a great deal of strength, because he had no trouble pulling me up. I didn't resist, but I also didn't help him. He pulled me back to the bed and put me back in it. "We were prisoners together, Dave," I reminded him. "Please tell me what's going on here. Did you bring me here? If so, why?" He stared at me with a concerned expression for some time, but didn't say anything. I finally spoke again. "Dave, I've been through hell these last several weeks. I've been in prison by a psycho. I've broken my foot so badly that I had to be in a wheelchair. I've been beaten almost to death. I need to know where I am and why. I need to get home, and I need to know what happened to Becky Geist." "Why are you so concerned about Becky Geist?" he asked, as though that was the only part he had heard. "You were talking about her the last time we met as well. You said that the reason you had come to the Pretius House was her. Who is she to you?" "I know her husband," I said unconvincingly. "How did you get your powers?" "I don't know," I lied. "Do I look stupid to you, Mr. O'Lantern?" he asked angrily. "I know that whatever happened to you right before the mysterious Dark Man showed up. Everyone thinks that you're a hero because you defeated the Dark Man. I don't think you're a hero, Mr. O'Lantern. I think the Dark Man was here because of you. Maybe you unleashed him so that you could play hero and everyone would look up to you." "You're crazy," I told him. "I don't want to be a hero. I don't want the attention or the glory. I stopped him because I had to. I stopped him because I was the only one who could, and he would have killed thousands of people that didn't deserve to die." "How does your obsession with Becky Geist play into this?" he asked me. I felt like he knew more than he was letting on, but I wasn't going to give him anything if he didn't. I could feel my skin burning, and I saw a glow coming off of it. It appeared that I had my powers back. "It doesn't matter," I told him. "You said you broke your foot about 3 weeks ago," he continued, "and yet your foot doesn't look broken now. Explain that." I can't, I told him, and this time I was telling the truth. I don't know why my foot is not broken. Something happened, and there was a fire. I saw Naomi, and no one has seen Naomi since your escape from the Pretius House, he informed me. In fact, nobody can find any record at all of Naomi Lincoln. Did you do something to her, or can we attribute that to your mysterious dark man? Maybe he's not actually gone. You two could be working together, and he shows up when you want to make somebody disappear. Did you or the Dark Man kill Becky Geist? Absolutely not. It was not the first time I had been accused of killing my wife. In fact, it had become a pattern. Detective Hall, the lead detective in Becky's case, had insisted that he was positive I had killed her. He had never been able to prove or disprove it. I had also been accused by my best friend Gary. To be fair, he had actually accused the Pumpkin Man, without knowing that was me. Lucky for you, most people don't think you had anything to do with that, he told me. Becky's good-for-nothing husband is the #1 suspect in her disappearance. I could believe that, too. But I don't think it's a coincidence you showed up shortly after her disappearance. Maybe you were working with her husband. Have you met Jack Geist before? What is the point of this? I yelled at him. He just laughed. Who are you under the pumpkin facade? He pondered. It wouldn't take much for me to find out. My skin got even hotter as I grew angrier and angrier. It would be more fun to torture it out of you. You can torture me, I told him, but you can't get answers out of me. You wouldn't be the first person to try. But I have nothing left to live for. I'm ready to die. Kill me if you want to. You're taking nothing away from me. What have you lost? He screamed, more in my direction than at me. He continued in a calmer tone. It seems to me that you have it all. You have fame, glory, and people look up to you. They see you as a hero. You're not a hero at all, are you, Mr. O'Lantern? I don't care about the fame or the glory, I explained to him. I have lost everyone I care about. I have lost everyone that ever meant anything to me. Have you ever really cared for someone, Dave? Have you ever been in love? If you had, I think you would realize that love is the only really important thing in life. Without it, we have nothing. You are a fool, Pumpkin, he said, and turned away from me. Facing the wall, he continued to talk. Love is temporary. Love fades, or it is taken from us. Love will never last. You know that better than anyone. Your love was taken from your grasp, and you were given an extraordinary gift. You could rule, Mr. O'Lantern. You could be a god. And instead, you have devoted all your power to chasing something that is long gone. You're Becky's husband, aren't you? I was silent. He turned back around to stare at me, but I didn't say anything. Under all this pumpkin bullshit, you're Becky's husband, he said again. You're the man who killed her. I did not kill my wife, I screamed at him with all the strength I had. I know that's what you told Detective Hall, he stated, pulling a tablet from a table in the corner and reading the screen. I would have done the same thing. There's a certain thrill in killing, isn't there? You had a motive the first time, but then you realized if you got locked up you wouldn't be able to do it again. And you craved that rush, didn't you? So you played the grieving husband. Then your chance to kill came again. He leaned in toward me until his face was close enough for me to smell his foul breath. I know about the woman you dropped from the top of the falling tower. You're insane, I told him. You have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't drop anybody from that tower. I tried to catch the lady that fell. You disgust me, Jack, he told me, putting the tablet back on the table. Can I call you Jack? I should have killed you in the cage at the Pretius House. No worries, though. I'm not going to let you walk free again. Vince said it might be too late to reach you, and he has tried. Vince is nothing more than a murderer, I wheezed, feeling the strength draining from my body. How can you possibly believe anything else after we were both locked up in his house? After he tried to kill us both? How blind can you be? He asked me, giving me a sorrowful look. Do you pay attention to anything that happens around you? After everything you've been given, all you want is the one thing you can't have. This is the reason that despite all your power, you will never be the hero of your story. You don't understand, I told him. Love is what makes a story. Without love, we are nothing. I would trade everything to have Becky back. I don't want to be the hero of my story. I want to be a loving husband to my wife. I am a loving husband. It doesn't matter if she's dead. She will remain alive in the hearts of those who love her. So kill me if you must. That just means I will be with her sooner. This is not a fucking movie, he screamed at me. His deep voice made the scream uncanny in ways I can't even describe. Do you think everything will turn out okay just because you have pure intentions? The world doesn't work like that, pumpkin. You're not listening, I told him in a voice as hard as steel. I don't care how things turn out. I can live with the decisions I've made, and I can die with them. I'm ready. You got it, mate, he said in a mock-sad voice. He pulled the gun from the inside pocket of his jacket and pointed it at my head. Don't kill him, a voice said from behind Dave. My blood ran cold because I recognized the voice instantly. It was hard to mistake the voice that had first spoke the moniker you now embraced as your own. He's not ready to die yet. He said he was ready to die, Dave told Vince. He will be of no further use at this point. I already asked him about everything, but he's giving up no information. He's just in the way now. I said don't kill him, Vince repeated. Do you question me after I spared your life? Dave hesitated now. He was obviously weighing Vince's logic against the idea that he was clearly in the right. After almost a minute, he said, What possible use can he be to us now? You were with him for days, and you got everything you're going to get from him. The most important thing to him now is to not give us any more information. The technology we acquired from Mortem House works both ways, Vince said, as if explaining something to a child. So far, we have used it to put memories in his head, but we can also use it to extract him. And then we kill him? Dave asked hopefully. As if in answer, a gunshot rang through the room. It wasn't Dave's gun, though, and the bullet didn't strike me. Blood spattered from Dave's head across my face as his body collapsed on the floor. When the time is right, Vince's voice said, but his mouth didn't move. That was strange to watch, and I felt like I needed to get up and do something. I was incapable of doing so, because I was now weaker than I had been the entire time. I wouldn't even be able to drag myself to the door again if I had the urge to do so. Vince turned around to face the man that had shot Dave. The man tried to pull the trigger on his gun again, but it only clicked. Empty. Vince threw a punch, and I saw the other man fall to the ground. I couldn't get a look at his face because he was hidden behind Vince's body. He got back up and kicked Vince in the gut. Now it was Vince's turn to fall to the ground. The face I saw when Vince fell to the ground took me by complete surprise. Given 1,000 guesses who was attacking Vince Pretius, I would not have been able to guess correctly. It seemed completely outside the realm of possibility. Then, though, I thought back to everything that had happened the last couple of years, and I realized I wouldn't have believed most of that either if I hadn't experienced it. The man attacking Vince Pretius was Vince Pretius. Two men with the same face squared off once again, apparently ready to fight to the death. They moved around the room until I couldn't even tell which one of them had shot Dave and which one had given Dave orders not to kill me. The gun used to shoot Dave was now on the floor, forgotten and useless. The two Vinces traded punches and kicks until they were both bruised and bloody. "This ends now," one of the Vinces said, and he pulled a large switchblade from his pocket. Releasing the blade, he started stabbing frantically at the other Vince. Blood ran all through the front of the Vince on the receiving end of the blade. They both seemed to have forgotten I was in the room until the one who had been stabbed repeatedly fell to the floor. The Vince who had been standing turned to me after the other one stopped twitching. His face was bruised and bloody, but it had a smile on it. Looking me in the eye, he said, "Now we can continue." To be continued.